Hello, and welcome to our initial lecture on Fredric Bastiat's The Law. The Law is a short pamphlet written in 1850 by Fredric Bastiat, and it just runs a little over 50 pages in length. And our series is going to break down the important parts of this pamphlet and Bastiat's writings about specifically the American economic system, the American government, and what true government should do for the people, the protections it should provide for people. But before we do that, in our initial lecture today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the man who wrote the book, because it's good to have a little background on the times he lived in and what formulated and helped him to formulate his opinions. So Bastiat was born in 1801. He was born to a businessman and his wife. Unfortunately, Bastiat's parents both passed away by 1810, his mother passing away in 1808 and his father following only 2 years later. So Bastiat was orphaned in 1810, but he was taken in by his paternal grandfather and his aunt, who raised him as their own. He was sent to school. But by 1818, when he was 17 years old, Bastiat joined his uncle's firm, where his father was a partner. And it was an important part of his life. Joining that firm for Bastiat gave him the experience of seeing how governments interact in the marketplace. Specifically, he grew up in the times during the Napoleonic Wars when the government was greatly influencing and greatly having its regulations affecting the marketplace. And this greatly influenced Bastiat's knowledge of how regulation can affect the marketplace, and helped him to, in his further studies down the road, helped him to formulate his economic theories. It was in 1831 that Bastiat first entered public life, so to speak. He was elected a Justice of the Peace in 1831. And in 1832, he served on the Council General, which is the local county body in basically the county where Bastiat lived at the time. By 1844, he was publishing articles. His first article was made public in 1844, and in 1846 he founded the Associations for Free Trade. A lot of Bastiat's initial writings and a lot of his writings and beliefs throughout his entire life were founded upon the idea that he was very much an anti-protectionist. In other words, when governments put tariffs and other things, regulations on the economy to not allow there to be free trade, it greatly affects the marketplace. Even when those regulations were put into place supposedly to protect the marketplace, it greatly interferes with the marketplace's ability to conduct itself in a manner that would be most productive for the country. In 1848 and 1849, there was the major rise of socialism in France and throughout different parts of the world. He began writing against the rise of socialism, and we'll take a closer look at what he has to say about socialism here in a few moments. In 1849, he won a seat on the Constituent Assembly, which was the National Assembly in France, and also that same year he won a seat on the Legislative Assembly in France. Unfortunately, during this time he was doing a lot of writing, he was doing a lot of touring as well to promote his ideas, and unfortunately he contracted tuberculosis at some point during his touring, which greatly cut down on his ability to keep giving speeches. He did finish one of his most important works, The Law, during this time, which was published in 1850, the same year that his life was cut short by tuberculosis. Now, let's take a brief overview of what Bastiat's belief system was regarding economics and governmental systems. And it's outlined quite nicely in The Law and in some of his other writings, even though we're only focusing upon The Law. To begin with, Bastiat very much was an admirer of America in the early and mid 1800s. He felt that the American system was as close as we could get on this earth to having a governmental system, a civil governmental system. His writings obviously focused on civil and not spiritual systems, and there's a distinction between the two. But the American system was about as good of a system as you could get in this world for protecting, and that's the key word here, for protecting people and people's rights, people's property rights, the lives of the citizens, and the liberties of the citizens. Bastiat very much was a firm believer in the American ideal laid out in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution, that the government does not give people rights. Rather, the people have God-given rights, and they form a governmental system in order to protect those rights. The government is there to protect people's rights, not to take them away, and it certainly is not the giver of rights. Although he did have an admiration for the American system, he did see that there were two great evils in the system in the 1840s, and that is, he saw that slavery was the paramount evil going on in America at the time, and also the protective tariffs that America had set up. He saw those as the two evils in the American system that needed to be gotten rid of in order for the system to become even better. In his writings, Bastiat will make use of a term that is not necessarily in the popular vernacular today, and that term is legal plunder. And he called legal plunder basically the definition, and we will talk in our future lectures in much more detail about what he felt legal plunder was. But legal plunder basically was the taking by force, usually by a governmental system, the taking of force of one person's property or rights and giving them to another person. And most of the time, that is done, in Bastiat's words, by brute political force. And that's what he wrote against. He wrote that is not what government should do. Too often, governments want to take. They become despotic in nature, and they never give back. They say they will, but he wrote against things like welfare and tariffs and those types of things, because those things take from people, and most of the time it does not it's not given back to the people, or if it is, it's given back in order to earn favors. Bastiat even was against the government being involved in the educational system, because, as he interestingly enough points out, if the government goes bad, if the government's doing something wrong, none of the teachers in the educational system are going to want to step up and say, the government's doing something wrong. Because if they did, the government is going to stop giving them their paycheck. So it's not a good connection to have the government involved in the educational system, and he was very much opposed to that. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about Bastiat's writing on socialism as well, because he was very clear about his disdain for socialistic tendencies, because he felt that the socialists basically are trying to play God. And by trying to play God, they're trying to remake the world in their own image, how they see the world should be. And it doesn't matter what form the socialism takes. It doesn't matter if it takes the form of communism, fascism, or even if it comes in nicer packages and nicer terms, such as universal democracy. Okay? No matter what the name it takes, it is forced upon the people. It is forced conformity. That's what the socialists want. That's what Bastiat says the socialists want, is forced conformity, everyone to be the same. The redistribution of wealth. Pervasive regulation. Forced equality in all things for everybody except for the socialists themselves, because they're the ones who want to run everything, and it becomes a dictatorship, whether that dictatorship takes the form of communism, socialism, or any of the other tyrannical forms of government that eventually come from that. Socialism, in the words of Bastiat, is the mortal enemy of liberty. So it is this man in his pamphlet, The Law, that we are going to take a closer look at. Bastiat was a defender of liberty. His writings led to not only we will be taking a look at it from a much more governmental standpoint as we take a look at his writings on the law, but his writings also were about governmental systems and economics. In fact, he's called the father of the Austrian School of Economics, and by some, he was even, to give a quote here, he is the most brilliant economic journalist who ever lived. And his belief, his statements, his purpose was to help people understand that the main purpose of the government is to protect people's lives, liberties, and properties. That the government protects the citizens, it doesn't give to the citizens. So with that, we will pick up tomorrow and we will begin our close review of this basically 50 to 60 page pamphlet written by Bastiat that is very illuminative of not only American system of politics in from the founding fathers up until the time of Bastiat, but also the world events that were occurring during Bastiat's time, especially the rise of the different communistic and socialistic ideologies that were being promoted at that time, especially in Europe. And then we can also take a close look at the warnings he gave and see if any of those warnings are applicable to what's going on in the world today, and specifically in the United States. So with that, I will sign off for today. Thank you very much.